A Roman bride once whispered that she feared her wedding night more than the wars her husband fought, and the strange part is, she wasn't exaggerating. Because hidden behind Rome's triumphal arches and marble statues was a ritual so unsettling, so quietly humiliating, that later historians tried to bury it under centuries of dignity and polished Latin. But the truth has a way of slipping through cracks, especially when it's wrapped in symbolism that feels more like a curse than a ceremony. It began after the wedding feast. When the torches flickered low, the wine turned sour in the air, and the last round of forced laughter died out. Roman weddings weren't celebrations, they were transactions. Families shook hands as if negotiating the sale of a small province, and brides were ushered around like ceremonial offerings. Yet the real ordeal came long after the music faded. That was when the bride was led into a private chamber that every noblewoman secretly dreaded. The atrium of Juno, a room meant to bless the union but designed to test the bride's spirit more than her faith. The room itself felt like it had been frozen in a myth. Laurel branches hung from iron hooks, shedding a herbal scent that couldn't hide the dampness trapped in the walls. Candles flickered nervously, casting shadows that twisted into shapes resembling watchful eyes. And in the center of the chamber stood an elderly matrona woman appointed by the bridegroom's family, chosen not for kindness but for her unwavering loyalty and her uncanny ability to detect fear. She was known in whispers as the custodian of virtue, though many brides privately referred to her as the harbinger. The matron circled the bride slowly, studying her as if examining a statue for cracks. She asked questions in a tone sharp enough to scratch stone. Questions about loyalty, modesty, household duty, questions designed not to be answered, but to reveal emotional hesitation. One wrong pause could stain a reputation for years. The irony, of course, was that the entire ritual had nothing to do with virtue. It was simply a way for the groom's family to assert dominance over the bride before she even crossed the threshold of her new home, a psychological test disguised as tradition. Once the interrogation ended, the ritual shifted into something far stranger. Rome called it deductio in domum, the ceremonial leading of the bride into her husband's home. But for noble families, this simple procession had mutated into a symbolic reenactment of Rome's favorite founding myth, the abduction of the Sabine women. Yes, the empire that prided itself on discipline insisted that every bride perform a faint gesture of resistance as she approached the doorway. Not a struggle, not a protest, just enough to echo the legendary past without embarrassing the family. A performance, delicate as spun glass, where the bride had to appear unwilling to leave her old life behind while still seeming honored to join the new one. Imagine the scene. A young woman, surrounded by relatives who watched her every movement, pretending to hesitate at the doorstep. Servants tugged her gently, urging her forward. Elderly women whispered advice that sounded more like threats wrapped in tradition. And all the while, the bride had to embody fear and devotion simultaneously. The slightest miscalibration could become family gossip for decades. Some brides were said to have rehearsed their hesitation in secret, perfecting it like an actor preparing for a tragic play. Because in Rome, even the most intimate moment was a performance meant to uphold the dignity of the household. Finally, once she crossed the threshold, the strangest part began, the part Rome tried hardest to erase. The couple was placed in their marital chamber, but not alone. Outside the door stood a group of elders, all pretending to bless the union while quite literally listening through the wood. They didn't expect to hear anything scandalous. Rome preferred symbolism over spectacle, but they insisted on being present to ensure the spirits of the household accepted the bride. Spirits, of course, meaning themselves. It was control disguised as superstition, tradition masquerading as holiness. In some accounts, the matron responsible for evaluating the bride earlier would return to press a small charm into the bride's palm. A charm believed to protect her from misfortune, but more realistically meant to remind her that the family was watching, always. Other families placed laurel branches under the bed as a symbol of victory. Victory in this case meaning possession. Even the perfumes used in the chamber were chosen for symbolic reasons, scents meant to calm, to cleanse, to ensure compliance. And while all this unfolded, the bride was expected to maintain perfect composure. Roman virtue wasn't soft. It was polished stone. The empire loved discipline more than affection, and so the wedding night became less of a shared moment between two lives and more of a ceremony where one life overshadowed the other. The groom, equally nervous, sometimes fumbled his lines in this somber play, but his mistakes were forgiven. The brides were recorded quietly but permanently. Over time, as Rome embraced new values, new religions, and new types of dignity, this ritual began to seem embarrassingly archaic. Later, historians downplayed it, softened it, or conveniently omitted the more humiliating details. After all, an empire that claimed to civilize the world didn't want anyone to know it once forced brides to act out myths and submit to psychological evaluation before stepping into marriage. Yet traces of the truth remain. A few scribes, perhaps amused or horrified by what they witnessed, preserved the details in letters, diary entries, and half-forgotten commentaries. And their words paint a picture not of a glorious tradition, but of a ritual designed to remind women that entering a Roman household meant surrendering more than their maiden garlands. It meant surrendering control, privacy, and even the right to begin their marriage without an audience pressed to the door. And that's how Rome turned a wedding night into a ceremony of fear, superstition, and shadows, one so strange the empire later pretended it never existed. A ritual where love was secondary, tradition was primary, and the greatest performance of a bride's life happened before she even crossed the bedroom threshold. And that's how one empire's obsession turned marriage into myth, or maybe into a curse that still whispers through the crumbling villas of forgotten Rome, if you think this was twisted. Wait till you see what the next Roman ruler did to keep his throne. Subscribe and step deeper into history's darkest corners.